Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Lately, I've been reading about the Fae and the accounts from people who have encountered them. It seems like the most actively involved with us are the goblin-like ones. Tomahawkers, redcaps, duend, etc. What are the goblins and what do they want from us?
My uncle claims he shot one back in the 90s. This is a story he tells me and my brother all the time. Be my uncle about to sneak back inside his house. He was out trying to shine deer out by the dirt road down the block from his house. This was back when my uncle was a teenager. He knew if he got caught sneaking out, then Grandpa would get him. When he got in the yard, he made sure to be extra careful. The yard at the time had a side fence running parallel to the property. You could follow the fence and be a hop and a skip away from the window to my uncle's room. Carefully and quietly, he made his way beside the fence. When he got a third of the way there, he heard someone humming a tune on the other side of the fence. He thinks Grandpa is waiting for him. He peeks over the fence to check. He sees nothing, but still hears the humming. He pinpoints the sound coming from beside a tree in the yard. Out of curiosity, he decides he can risk it by shining his flashlight to the tree. Since Grandpa's room window is on the opposite side of the house, he shines the flashlight and sees a small green little man leaning by the tree. He was about 3 foot tall, had pointed ears, and was wearing what looked like clothes made out of raccoon fur and garbage bags. The thing stopped humming and eyed my uncle. Without hesitation or thinking, my uncle raises his gun and lets a shot at the creature. He swears that it hit the thing and it vanished. My uncle runs down the fence line and hops it to crawl back into his room. He expects Grandpa to storm into his room to see what was with the gunshot, but it never happened. My uncle opens his bedroom door and can only hear the clocks ticking and Grandpa's snoring. My uncle stays up for a while, then finally goes to sleep. Grandpa never brings up hearing gunshot. My uncle decided to just forget about the whole thing. He still says that he feels like he's being watched and refuses to go near the tree where the thing was.
To acquire human husbands.
People who do this don't consider what a relationship with a goblin is really like. Are you going to put up with the pungent odors she puts off? Or the green gunk from her skin shed? Or having to clean up after she files her teeth? Then there's the matter of worms and bugs being a common seasoning for her meals. Enjoy it because salt and pepper is not allowed in the house. People think they're getting a green fleshlight instead of a BPD swamp trickster. My nan always said that her dad put up with all of the above from her mom. Don't know how the man did it really. Yeah. It's in my family, we don't really talk about it much. Back in the day, my great-grandfather, we'll call him Todd, went out into swamps and bagged him a goblin bride. He never had any luck with the local ladies and eventually it got to him. Desperation led to drastic measures, which lead to my nan having a goblin for a mom. It's X, so don't really care. But if you guys want, I can tell the story. Okay, let me start this off with dashing some of your misconceptions. Their parts match with ours, and interbreeding families have happened in the past and still happen rarely today. For the most part, goblin folk live in dark, dank areas like in swamps, sewers, caves, and tunnels. They are part of the Fae, so keep in mind we really can't interact with them unless they want to. That being said, they still like to mess with people who venture too far out into their territory. Goblins are on average about 3 feet in height. They have cold green skin that secretes a thick, foul-smelling mucus like a toad. Their ears are pointed as well as their needle-like teeth. I say all this to paint a picture of what my great-grandfather decided to make his wife and knock up with my nan. That made her half goblin, and me an eighth. No, this doesn't make me some magical person. All that means is for 3 generations we had to deal with added health problems from a dip into a murky gene bog. It means being 2 feet shorter than my peers, needing to wear a retainer, having skin problems, and then there's the fact that we can stink out a house if we don't bathe in perfumes and oils. Story starts in my next post. Remember, my great-grandfather's name is Todd. B. Todd, an immigrant from Ireland living in rural New Jersey. Came to America as a toddler during the Roaring '20s. Lived through a brutal depression. Avoid serving during World War II. Be labeled a coward by the rest of the town both during and after the war. Live your mid and late 20s in a shack you build out in the woods on the town's outskirts. Spend your days as a painter and general labor making crap pay. All of this could be forgiven if you had a special someone. But not for him. He had a bad reputation around town and none of the local women would give him a second glance. One day he got tired of it all. And he took what little savings he had to visit a woman a few counties away. The woman was known all over the area as being a witch. For the right price, her help was available to anyone willing to pay up. Todd was that type of person. He gave her almost all of his money so she would help with his troubles. She agreed and gave him a large burlap sack with sour butter inside, a red hat, a small mirror, and 2 iron bracelets. She instructed him to go out into a nearby swamp on the next new moon. While there, open the sack and put on the red hat. Next, he was to turn away from the sack and use the mirror to watch it from the reflection. He was to wait until something crawled out of the swamp and into the sack. When that happened, he was to use the mirror to see. And while doing so, tie up the sack, placing the iron bracelets over the sack's knot. Then using the mirror, make his way with the sack out of the swamp and back to his home, while wearing the red hat. Once he was at home, he was to untie the sack and quickly place the iron bracelets over the wrists of whether crawled out of the sack. Then burn the sack, bury the hat, and throw the mirror down the well. He did all this, and that's how he met my Nan's goblin mother. But that's the story Nan's told us. Switching to her point of view. Be my Nan, calling her Brit. Always be around your dad and love him a lot. Don't ever recall really seeing your mom, but you do talk to her some. Your earliest memory is a small green shape watching you in your bed. Remember a cold hand lovingly stroking your hair. Remember when you were little that you lived in a decrepit shack, but then suddenly moved to a large house in town. At 5 years old, start questioning things. Like why your mom only talks to you on the other side of a locked door. Why is there a sour smell where your mom is? How does this slime get everywhere? Why do you eat oatmeal for breakfast with butter and cream, but your dad carries a bowl with worms and ants to your mom's room? As she ages and goes to school, she notices how different she is from her peers. They have smooth skin, hers is rough and wet. They can stand the bright light at recess, she has to cover her face. She has crooked teeth and constant toothaches. They can smile widely while they bully her for how she smells, constantly on the way home. But Brit would never get the courage to ask her parents about why she was so different. She would learn to defend herself and make do with what she had. Learned how to fight and win even if they had a head over her in height. As Brit grew up, the comments made by the adults was what would get to her.
There's that girl. Have you ever seen her mother?
You know, the local doctor had rushed to her house when she was born and only was allowed to talk to the mom behind a closed door.
Dr. Johnson says she had some form of green jaundice when she was born.
Eventually it got to be too much and she decided to ask her parents what was with all the strangeness. That's where Nan tells us her dad came clean with everything. Beyond that, Nan would never say what happened after that. Only when she became an adult did she come home to her father holding 2 iron bracelets. Her mom had decided to leave them to return to the swamp. Nan would go on to marry and have my mom and her siblings. Nan's dad would pass away a few years after my mom was born. Nan would move back into her childhood home and we would visit on holidays. She would tell all of us this story when we were little and most of us think it's bull. But we've seen things throughout the years that makes us question otherwise. Like Nan leaving out bowls of food topped with worms and crickets. And the bowl is being cleaned while everyone is inside. We've all seen little things moving quickly out of the corner of our eyes. Or Nan talking quietly to someone in another room. And hearing another quiet voice. Then when you go to look, Nan is by herself. But the strongest thing that shakes our surety is us all having a similar memory. Of us being little and having a small green thing caress our head lovingly with its cold hand.
Show a picture of the goblin.
Don't have a picture. Never really was an option to begin with. Though Nan says that the Lord of the Rings goblin-like pic related is the closest thing to what her mother looked like. But with the teeth unrotted and more needle-like, as well as having a nose.
My family and I have had a couple unusual encounters with the aliens. For whatever reason it may be, they have decided to be part of our lives. I will be telling these 4 stories in chronological order. This will be my first time doing a green text, so please bear with me. If you have any questions or doubts, please feel free to ask me any questions. Also, if anyone else has any stories they want to share, that would be much appreciated. Green text below. Be me 12 to 15 years old, early 2010s. In truck with stepmom and sister driving off somewhere. Pass abandoned house. Giant bright orange orb emerges from house. I see it and I think it's cool. Orb goes off into the distance in S lines. Pointed out to stepmom and sister. Thing is so big and obvious they can't miss it. Stepmom says she doesn't see it. Sister says doesn't see it. I'm confused. Arrive home and document the experience. I remember drawing it in the shape of a tube with lights emitting from the bottom. This was the first UFO I had seen, and to this day I don't know what it was doing at this house. Story 2. My parents are divorced, so a lot of the time spent with each of them was split during the year. On this particular year I decided to stay at my mom's house during the 4th of July. Me 16 years old, 2013. It's 4th of July, family is out and I decide to stay home. Looking up paranormal shit and getting spooked because it's fun. Decide to take my own pictures because why not? Shots are taken in my backyard. Backyard is very dark and get spooked. Feel like I'm being watched. Decide to go back inside. Look through my pictures and alter them using an app I downloaded. Use negative filter and higher brightness. Holy shit. Anomaly found in my backyard, Kino. Take a second look, become very anxious. Eyes are clearly squinting due to the flash. Head and body are visible in the picture. It's a gray. Start freaking out at this point and delete the picture. Lock the house down, turn on all the lights, and hide in my room until my family comes back home. Story 3. Me, 19 years old, 2016. Family moves into a new house in a different city. Live in the back with my grandmother. Grandmother is very religious. One night while I'm out, my grandmother is awoken to very bright blue lights at her window, so bright they fill the room with light. My grandmother has described these lights as heavenly lights. My grandmother begins crying and starts to pray. Bright lights dim and go away. My grandmother becomes hysterical and wakes my family. My mom tries to calm down my grandmother as she is clearly in a state of panic. Next morning my mom tells me this story. My grandmother has calmed down, but I can tell she is still shaken up by the incident. Grandmother confirms the story. I'm confused because I arrived home that night around 2 a.m. and did not see anything. Take it into consideration but don't think too much about it. A couple days later my mom takes a picture of the sky above our house. Above our house is a slim, metallic, disc-like floating object. Become a bit paranoid again and feel anxious when coming home late at night. I would also like to add that my family around this time were hearing footsteps on the roof. We had raccoons in the area, but my mom and stepdad would profusely claim someone was on the roof. They described it as stomping. Story 4. Me 23 years old, 2020. Out with girlfriend. Decide to go to the park. While at the park we decide to look at the stars as it is becoming night. As we are stargazing I notice it. A giant ball of fire is in the sky. I point it out to my girlfriend and she sees it as well. We are in awe of this ball, it looks so unreal. We hear a plane coming by. Ball zips out to space like in the movies. Girlfriend and I left speechless. This was by far my weirdest experience. I have heard stories of these balls, but to see one so close and clear was a whole other beast. It literally looked like the sun was in the sky except no light was emitting from it. It was also dead silent, which made it unnerving to watch. I feel like ever since I took that picture of the alien in my backyard these guys won't leave us alone. I hope to never run into one. I feel like if I did I would go insane. Thanks for reading.
Okay/X/, it's story time. Whether or not you believe this is up to you. I'm just wondering if anyone else has seen something similar or knows what I'm talking about. It's been in the back of my mind for some time and I can't figure out what I saw. Be me. Friend is driving me down a freeway after he picked me up from my house. It's about 7 or 8 p.m. See something super bright in the sky out of the corner of my eye. It was so bright that I thought it was the sun until I remembered it's almost night and the sun is setting in the west. The light from the sun is hitting it and reflecting so much I couldn't make out what it was at first. It's like it was covered in mirrors or something. Seemed like 100% of whatever energy was hitting it just bounced off. A cloud covered part of the sun and I get a better look at it. Couldn't see exactly what it was because the reflections were still bright, and they moved, think disco ball. But I can clearly see it's some kind of giant orb, maybe more of an egg shape, but it was hard to tell. Pretty much a giant ball bearing just floating about 2 or 3 miles up. Made no noise, had no wings, propellers, or visible exhaust. It's hard to tell at first because of the reflections, but it starts to look a little bit smaller. After watching for about 30 seconds or so I realize it's definitely getting smaller. Over the course of about 45 seconds to a minute it completely disappeared. I think it was turning invisible because for a split second before it disappeared it had a different shape than an orb. Imagine it disappearing the same way it would look if you poured paint over a tennis ball, and it falls down the sides until it's covered. Not certain about this because any visible part was still reflecting the sun like a mirror. The disappearing process looked very liquid and organic. I've never seen anything like this before. This happened in the Midwest in a suburban area. Happened around this time last year. It took about 2 minutes from the time I saw it until it disappeared. Might be unrelated, but about a week later I saw several National Guard Chinooks fly over where it was floating. This is very unusual, and I have never in my life seen any US military vehicles around here. Lived here almost 20 years, and there's not major military bases nearby.
These Scottish photographers take picture of UFO while on hike. Send to government. They classify it and take all the photos and negatives. Fast forward 30 years. Freedom of Information Act says it should be released to public. Ministry of Defense goes no, it remains secret until 2076. Sorry friends. Some lad had a copy of it and kept it secret for 30 years. Leaked it recently, breaking protocol. Even gave his name and proof of the physical photograph. So, is this an alien spacecraft being escorted by Royal Air Force aircraft? Or is it the fabled, mythological Aurora project of the US Air Force? What are the advantages of such a shape for aircraft? Does it have stealth advantages? Is it truly silent like the photographers claim? What will happen to the lad who leaked it? Or is it a UFO? Who are they? Were they a threat? Is this an accidental reveal to the governments? Or was it part of a deal, trade, diplomatic mission?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.